Well, hello, I'm Annie-Emprima Martin,
I'm Rosemary Fajardo.
and this is Empowering Empaths. We're on day
8.
eight. Day eight. This morning feels like a whole nother day. And today's topic is we're going to be talking about trauma versus empowerment, the theme of the day. So I'm going to switch over to the PowerPoint, and we'll get started. Oh, I say that and I don't even know where the window is. There we go. Okay. So this is one of my favorite topics. Can everyone see the whole screen?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So this is going to be interactive, and we're really just focusing on this one screen today. Normally, we're looking at this. This is our standard piece where we talk about the intention of what we do, moving from chaos to clarity, where chaos is really fear-based. Clarity is love-based, and the only way to get from chaos to clarity is to move through the middle, and it's a very messy middle, and it's a lot of discomfort. So we are all experiencing right now this messy middle called a pandemic. But here's where it's going to change how we look at the world. So here's my logo. You can see my logo really faded in the background. The swirl, there's the chaos. The straight line is the clarity. And the clarity is not saying that there's not chaos around you. It's just saying that your mind is clear on what your intention is for your outcome, and that you're focused on that, and you're not allowing the distractions to have a mission veer and detour you off the path. So this is really a faith-driven belief, and it can be religious faith, it can be spiritual faith, it can be science, whatever your faith is, that's personal to you. But whatever it is that's guiding you, it's saying here's the straight line on that journey. So this is one of my favorite topics to talk about, because this is the path. I physically took this path. I walked this path. I had to do a lot of tears and crying on this journey, right?
Yeah.
I didn't know I was caught up in so much drama, and I didn't even know that I came from a background of drama until I read this book by Dr. Stephen Karpman. And it clicked so heavily that I want to share it with the world. And this was a couple few years ago. So in the Karpman drama triangle, and this is something he created back in the 60s. So this is old. But it still applies. And he talks about at the starting gate, there's always 3 characters. You always have a victim, you always have the persecutor, and you always have the rescuer. And where I came in, the role that I played in my life was rescuing.
Yeah.
And I would always rescue people, and then expect them to rescue me back. And I had already made the judgment in my mind that by me rescuing them, I was above them. So why would they come and rescue me? And I also played the victim, and I also played the persecutor. So what happens here is they're inside the triangle. So if we look at the triangle, when we talk, empowerment is on the outside of the triangle, for visual purposes, and the drama is the inside, and they just get caught inside, and they're bouncing around. Like something that gets trapped inside a glass jar, a bug, and it's just hitting everything and bouncing around. That's what's happening here. So when we have a victim, the victim has said, you did this to me, and the persecutor's like, you're the problem, you're the reason this is happening. And the rescuer's like, let me come in with my judgment subconsciously and place myself above the person, and I'm going to come save them to validate my own existence. Sound familiar? And so what happens is the rescuer comes in, and the rescuer, that's the starting gate, and they'll usually change roles. So the rescuer can become the persecutor or the victim becomes the persecutor becomes the victim, and it's just like throwing blame all over the place. And sometimes it's super subtle, and sometimes it's so blatant, it's ridiculous. And it tends to be when people are in addiction, or they're in codependency, or they're in anything where there's shame, there's guilt, there's fear. it's the blaming. That's all part of this drama triangle. And what happens in the drama triangle too is that power gets taken away. So the rescuer takes away power from the victim and says, I don't trust that you have it within yourself to come to the conclusion to empower yourself. I'm going to do it for you. So helicopter parents are rescuers. They're not allowing their child to fall down and get hurt and be uncomfortable and develop. Because if we look at the other side, the opposite of a victim is a creator saying, for whatever reason, I manifested this scenario, and now I have to choose to do something with it. The challenger says, the challenger pokes holes. So sometimes the challenger is in favor of the creators, like poking holes at truth as a friend, but sometimes the challenger doesn't even realize they're participating in this. They're just the ones that bring awareness. So an example might be if you meet somebody and you're like, I don't know why I don't like them, but I don't like them. Sometimes you're right, the energy, folks are right, and it's like just negative energy. But most of the time, it's because they're mirroring something within you that makes you uncomfortable. And if you don't like you feeling that, this person is now mirroring it up and like bringing it up in your face and saying, time to deal with it. So that's the challenge. Is here the challenge presents itself. What are you going to do with it now? And then the coach is like, oh, you want to do this? How are you going to do this? How are you going to get there? And if you have a friend that's a coach, that's the friend that holds space for you as you're going through something difficult. They're not bringing the answer to you. They're not trying to fix it for you. They're just saying, hey, I'm here if you need help. Let me know how I can help. And I'll play my part, or I'll just hold space for you. I will just stand next to you by your side and say, I don't know how to help you through this, but I will be there for you to let you know that you have support as you move through this. So let's focus on the middle. The red side is external. It's giving power away. It's where we disempower ourselves, where the creator says, I am in charge of all of this. I manifested this. I can create this. And if I don't like my situation, I will change my outcome. Then you have the blaming, the evoking. So blaming is you did this to me, and evoking is let me see how I can correct this. One takes power away, one empowers the self, the body. Them-esteem is an interesting term, and it was a term that one of my doctoral teachers used frequently. And he believed that there's no such thing as low self-esteem and high self-esteem. You either had esteem or you didn't. If you didn't have self-esteem, you had them-esteem. And so self-esteem is that feeling within. It's an internal. Them-esteem is saying, I need the pat on the back. I'm going to go rescue someone for validation, and I'm going to have judgment on that. But I want the pat on the back that I was the one that fixed it. It's the validation and it's the recognition for external reasons. And one of the biggest cues on if you're being a rescuer is if you're going to help a person, but when you're falling down, that's not the person you pick up the phone and call. It's a counterfeit relationship. It is not a trusting relationship. But if you have a symbiotic friendship with entanglement, like a soul sister or like soul family or whatever language you might use, best friends or brothers, and if you fall down and you call them to help pick you up, and when they fall down, they call you, that's a balanced relationship. But if you're always the one rescuing or you're always the one being rescued and it's not balanced, there's a problem. It's not a true friendship. So what we really, when it comes down to it all, at the very bottom, on the red side, you're shrinking. You're trying to adapt to a world by shrinking and not expanding your own energy. But belonging is when you say, this is who I am. This is where I am on my journey. I'm still learning, but this is where I am. And I want to be accepted for the place I am on my timeline, for the spot I am. So I'm going to come back. We're going to stop sharing. And now that you have the basis, I want to talk about first, if we could each give an example of a time when we were part of that drama triangle. And it can be super personal. It can be a long time ago. It can be recent. It can be a small story or a large story. But to each think about a way where we played into a drama triangle. And then we're going to go around after again, and we're going to talk about something we did that was part of empowerment. Do you want to start, Rosemary?
Yeah, I'm like the loading circle right now.
If anyone else is ready.
Yeah, if anyone else is just ready to like chime in, go ahead. And I'm still loading right now.
Okay.
Do you want to talk about your story? You talked about it this morning to like kind of help get the gears going.
So yeah, my story is a little bit long. I'm actually going to tell a different story because I grew up in a very Arabic family. And what I didn't realize is that my brothers would always get in trouble. And I was the one that got blamed for it, for actions that were beyond my control. So as I grew up in my teens and my 20s, the message I learned as a child was, if somebody else screws up, it's your fault, Annie. Right? Because what else would I think when every time my brothers got in trouble, I got grounded, or I got yelled at for being the oldest and not watching them, even though they were really like rambunctious twins. And so the message I had to undo many years later was that it's not my job to be a rescuer. And it's not my job. And I had to learn it because I kept coming through periods of time in relationships that they were just like exploding. And I couldn't understand why they didn't want to be rescued. And they couldn't understand why they needed to be rescued. So it didn't end well ever in any of them. And so that was like this huge awakening when I read this book. It was this big, huge aha moment. And then I started understanding empowerment. And what I saw was, when you allow people, and you'll see me wear Live at Your Own Pace t-shirts. It's a store down in Container Park. And I wear that because it's a reminder to me of how beautiful it is to watch people come to their own conclusion, to find their own books, and to just be there for people when they're ready to be empowered, but not force people to be empowered. Because I'm seeing more beautiful moments as a coach than I did when I was a rescuer. And it has also given me much stronger friendships, because I have friendships now where it's symbiotic, that upward symbiotic growth of a personal journey. So that's my piece.
Does anyone else have anything that popped up, or still thinking? I think I have an example.
And it can be a super small story. It doesn't have to be very vulnerable at all.
The question is, when was a time when you were either the victim, persecutor, or rescuer in the Karpman drama triangle? Do you got one? No, not yet. Okay. Well, I don't know which I would fall under, but I would always blame others for not being able to understand me.
Yeah.
I guess it's victim. Yeah, it's victim. Yeah. So yeah, I guess that's most of my life. I've had like many friends, because I've always just been that type of person to bounce in different friend groups and just make a lot of friends. And I don't know, I blamed others for not understanding why I would keep bouncing.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was me playing the victim of why I felt lonely, blaming others for not being able to understand me. Does anyone else have a story?
Just like you, it is not very hard to develop friendships for me either. But I'm also the person that I found over the years that people could dump their emotional garbage on.
Yeah.
It's never are you emotionally stable enough to hear this? Or are you at capacity? It's just, I need to vent and you're the person I want to vent to. And I find myself not necessarily wanting to fix it, because I don't like when people do that for me necessarily.
Yeah.
I understand venting to listen, but sometimes it could be a lot. And I find myself not putting that boundary on folks. My former YouTube partner at work, before she had her person, she treated me like her person. I mean, wanted to talk all the time. We were going to the same church. We worked in the same place. Whenever she had free time, I was the person that she was texting and calling, and she was having issues with her kid, and she'd be, hey, let's do this, hey, let's do that, hey, let's hang out. And then once she got her person and I was going through my own stuff, it was like, oh no, I don't wanna, or let me fix it. This is what you need to do right now. And I realized that we did not have that best friendship as I so believed. So
It wasn't a healthy friendship.
no.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing, Tashari.
Yeah.
Does anyone else have an example in their life?
Yeah, I have an example. I had actually a friendship that I had all through high school and through college. I guess I kind of have two, but one's a little bit more touchy that I still have to kind of deal with. So I'm going to share a different one. But the friendship with one of my friends from high school was, she would always call me and kind of dump her negative things that she was going through into my lap. And she'd always be like, what do I do? What do I do? And, you know, I'd offer what my thoughts or what I would do. But it was always just weird, because it was, sometimes it would be like months that I wouldn't hear from her. And then she'd call me and she, you know, I'm still going through this and this hasn't changed and I haven't, you know, this isn't working. And it's been almost a year now that we haven't talked, just because it was such a repetitive thing for like 4 years. And that was because our friendship, so it was probably 2008 when we graduated high school, and we had been friends for 4 years. So it's been like a year now that we haven't talked. So all that time in between was just issue, and then time not talking, and then issue with the same kind of details. And so I just was feeling that there was a lot of more negative side, because she didn't even call me when she got pregnant. And so it was interesting how she didn't call me for a positive thing to let me know that she was going through something positive. So it's, I guess, in that relationship, the rescuer and the victim. And it just wasn't, I was saddened that she didn't call me for a positive thing. So it was interesting to kind of see that. And I still haven't talked to her. It's been a while now. Her daughter's probably like a year or a year and a half now.
Oh. Were you going to say something to Shari? I thought you were going to hit your unmute button. That's okay. Does anyone else have a story they want to share? Oh,
Can I share?
Oh, go ahead, Kathy.
Oh, sorry.
No, you're fine.
So, so you know, like Asians, like we don't really like. You're always told like, oh, don't say anything unless it's positive or you know it's useful or whatever. So a lot of times, like when I was feeling things, like I would just keep it to myself. Like I wouldn't reach out to my friends. And then in my head, I'm like, how come no one's asking me? Like, you know, like I have a smile, but at the same time, I'm like, you don't realize that there's something off. But then I had to realize that I have to speak up. Like, I can't be playing the victim in my head. Like, how come no one's checking up on me if I don't say anything? You know? It's small, sorry.
Same. No, that happens with me too.
It's so powerful.
Yeah. Thank you. Do you want to share, Gerald? Thank you. I'll mute myself. Wait, you're muted.
I can unmute.
So for me, there are so many times where I'd be like the rescuer, like growing up. I'd always make sure people were good, like in my view, to make sure I was good. Like I had to make sure they were having a good time. I had to make sure they were like happy, and I was not intending my own needs and stuff. Sometimes I'm like, oh, but am I happy? But then it was just a false belief that, oh, if I help them over and over again, if I make sure they're having fun, even though they probably don't even want my help or want me to do it, I just needed to do it just so I was good. Yeah,
Yeah.
that was something for me, being the rescuer all the time. I realized that. And then, yeah.
Thanks, Jill. Natalia or Elise, do you have anything
I do.
to share? Yay!
Mine's pretty similar to Annie's story. Mine's been since I was young. Due to my culture in the Latin American, especially in the Hispanic families, we live our life through a unit. Everybody has an expectation and a job in it. I grew up with my dad being the breadwinner of the family. My mom stayed home and she didn't work, and she was basically, her job was to be work, make sure food was home, food was there, taking care of us, nurturing us, making sure that she was there to guide us properly, because they've seen that families that didn't have their mom home affected that, I guess, growing to their time and views. And so I grew up in all three categories, where I was a victim, I was the rescuer, I was the prosecutor, I guess. And that basically was it became an expectancy for me to always rescue my family when it came to problems. I did have in my family a lot of codependency. It came to also drug addictions in my family as well, which made it even harder. So boiling points to me were that it literally lasted till not too long ago, till I decided to empower myself. And that was when my dad passed away. He passed away in 2017. Yeah, because he was basically the patriarch of our family, the one who took care of of all the finances in the home. It was a stressor. That was a stressor that woke me up, because I had to step in the shoes, because I am the oldest out of two. And because I was always the one that was more mindful, I wasn't into the family and the codependency, and it came to all the victimizing, everything. I was basically doing my job as family, because family is what you do for family, right? So his death was what made me shift, and was basically what moved me into empowering myself, because I started seeing life in a different perspective, and I changed it to basically from being in those three categories to empower myself for my self-growth. And I started putting my boundaries, and unfortunately they came to a lot of back and forth of expectations, family values, like confusions, like a lot. It was overwhelming, been overwhelming. And I'm still fighting through a lot of stuff to the day. But I am stronger when it came to to that change, which was very 360 to what I grew up seeing of what it is, to what it was what family unity is supposed to be. We have families back, whatever, families thicker than water kind of stuff. I kind of shifted that, and so that was my shift. After my dad passed away, I saw life. I'm like, you know what? It's me or right now to change for me. So
Beautiful.
that was me.
Thank you, Natalia.
Thank you.
And Elise, you want to share?
Yeah, I actually have two things. One is definitely my family. And this kind of like started my whole journey like a couple of years ago, about just like accepting myself for who I am, because growing up they'll be like, oh, why are you so emotional, why are you so sensitive, blah blah blah. And I know, like, I bring this up all the time, but it's literally been like my number one stress growing up. And there came a point where I was like, you know what, I would always sit there and be like, they already know that I'm sensitive, but they won't approach me in a different way. And then one day I was just like, well, it doesn't seem like anybody wants to like adjust to me. So not that I necessarily adjusted for them, but I was just like, I just have to accept myself for who I am, and I need to figure something out that's going to work for me. and just being able to accept myself for the fact that I'm sensitive and not looking at it as like a weakness was like such a huge thing. But also a rescuer, I honestly could say that like the last three, like my 3 relationships, like I was definitely the rescuer. And that was, I could have like probably saved myself from that. But yeah, like I know that now, so it'll be different.
Yay.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
Do you want to say anything, Annie, before we move into a positive empowerment example?
Yeah, just a couple things is that what I heard is, like Leilani, you were mentioning about your friend, they were caught in the spiral, and they had no intention of ever leaving that spiral. At least at that moment in time, she was happy being in the spiral, or at least content. And
Right.
you had already left to be able to see that she was in the spiral. And then I also saw like our journey, like it's not always going to be comfortable going from chaos to clarity, right? There is discomfort in it. But like Elise, when you were talking, once you master the sensitivity, it's a superpower, because there's a lot you can do with it once you master it.
Yeah.
It's very powerful.
Yeah, that's something I definitely want to master.
And that's why we're here.
I knew you were going to say that, Annie. But yay! Now we can go around and say one example of how we're part of the empowerment dynamic. Does anyone want to eager to talk first, or I can say an example? But
I'll go first.
Yeah, yay! Go ahead, Leilani.
3 years ago, when I started working at my job, I didn't really know what exactly I wanted to do, but I knew I just wasn't fulfilling something that I enjoyed doing. And when I had quit my job and I took a month off, and I knew that I wanted to work in the medical marijuana industry. So I started applying to all the jobs, and I just kind of waited to see what happened next. And I hadn't told my parents. My parents are very old school, very traditional, very religious. And I got hired on, and I knew my plan because I have my degree. So I knew I wanted to start from the bottom, work my way up, just let it, let my work show for itself. So I had the plan to get where I am today 3 years ago. And when I told my parents and my family, some of my family didn't take it very well. And I knew that being in the industry would allow me to be myself, would allow me to kind of just take a weight off my shoulder of having to hide something that has been involved in my life, and how it helps me with, my anxiety. I take CBD, so it helps me with my anxiety, kind of calm me down. And half my family stopped talking to me. My mom told me that she was disappointed in me, and I knew kind of the path that I wanted to take. And now being one of the general managers for a dispensary, well, we're temporarily closed because of everything going on, but being where I am today and seeing my mom actually be okay with sharing with someone else, because in the beginning she didn't even want to share what I did or anything. And even recently she was talking to a friend, and they're like, oh, what does your daughter do? And in front of me she's like, oh, she is a GM for a dispensary. And her saying it, and her coming to one of my events recently that for our podcast was very empowering to me, because I knew back then what I wanted to do, and now I'm there, and I knew I was going to get here. And even though there was negative side effects from family, I see who was truly there for me.
Yay!
Yay.
Proud of you.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing, Leilani. Does anyone else have anything they want to share? No?
Okay.
Oh, wait. Oh, who's that? Oh, Natalia. Yeah. Yay.
I had two big moments in my life of empowerment. The first one was when I came out to my family that I was gay. That was a hard one because I actually was married to a man. I married very young to a person who was basically the ideal type of person they wanted in my life. And because, you know, family knew better, and I thought, well, if this is what is good, what, you know, they see as happy and is good for me, because I didn't have my self voice at the time. I didn't have it. So I married somebody, which was a very, I could say, it was a relationship where I grew a lot. I grew with him a lot, but in that relationship, it was almost where I was in a denial, because I knew what I was since I was young, since I was little, and I can remember. But I always thought, like, you know what, it's just, put it back, because it's not what you need right now. Because your family, the culture, your religion is not going to be for this, Yeah. And so after 7 years, and after being so miserable with myself and finding there was always an empty hole in me, and there was never, it was almost like I was living my life for other people, for their expectations, you can say. I lived, you can say, the whole American life, that family love. In my family in Mexico, they were like they were they saw me as the role model, I married young, I had a house, I had cars, I had everything, and I gave up all of that when I decided to break my marriage and come out to my family all at the same time. I kind of did it like a band-aid, like took it off,
Whip it off.
yeah, it was painful. I'm not gonna lie, it was the hardest thing I did, because my family in Mexico really like they had me there, and to break that, it was big, because in my family, especially from my mom's side, it was a family of 13, her family and siblings, and then the line came down of their children with children, the whole bunny farm. So in that was pretty tough, but for the positive side, all my family was very, very, very supportive, so which was the biggest blessing of my life, and which gave me my empowerment to basically face my fear. That was a moment that when I decided to face my fear, and I had no fear, which is at the time was my biggest fear, I pushed on even further to literally do all the things that I was scared and I wanted to do and pursue, but I was like, I was always unsure with. And so it came to that point where that was one of my biggest empowerment moments. And the second one was when my dad passed away. After being so stressed to the limit, till I literally, if I was like a needle point to breaking point of stress and overwhelming and a loss and mourning, and I literally didn't have a chance to mourn, because when my dad passed away and I had to take care of my family, I had to go to work, and I ended up having 2 jobs to take care of expenses. I did my shift of basically was to see my life it's kind of hard for me to speak it, but I was very I felt like I was living my life with what my dad would love to see me live it, as by like what he wished for me to live, and how he would want to, like you say, as a spirit, how he would want to see me. I started living my life as I'm living to the fullest. I'm going to, take advantage of every day, every minute, every moment, everything that I have around me, because that death that my dad passed away, which was a very sudden one, not expected. He died pretty young. That was very traumatic. That I decided to shift. And again, it was another empowering moment, because I started living life, for the moment, for the feeling, for the happiness, for the joy, for the growth, and for today.
Yay. Thank you so much, Natalia. And
That's
I like you to hear.
Thank you.
Beautiful story of going from adapting to belonging.
Mm-hmm.
It was pretty tough.
But look, here you are now, stronger than ever, empowered as ever.
Yay!
Yay! So it's actually 10:06. Did you all want to keep continuing sharing the positive stories, or do you want to just go into like free chat time for 10 minutes?
So what I want to do is I want to make sure before we end the recording, because I'll end the recording, we can continue talking. Normally we start at 9:30, we end at 10, and then we stay on for a little bit longer and just have like open conversation. Is there anything anybody wants to edit out of the recording? Okay, so I'm going to close it out and we're going to stop recording, and then we'll continue our chat.